Welcome back to In His Mind. So, on this topic, I was given a pamphlet here out of this church that I visited, Whom Shall I Marry? And the church itself, I want to say it's a Presbyterian church. I will need to double check and make sure that I'm right before I say anything else about the church. It's a smaller church, but it's one that I think I'll be going to for a while. Right, so this is interesting as far as with marriage. I have a lot of thoughts on marriage, but I have very little that's concrete as far as experience and all that goes. I've talked to other people numerous times about marriage itself, and there's a couple things to note. One of them is that there's not really a contract, like God requires a specific contract, like we have to go before a state or a government or whatever, but that is something that is usually celebrated and done for. Second, this reconfirms what I had suspected for a while, is that in most cultures, marriage is almost a necessity of life, particularly for women, and how survival usually hangs on marriage, which I had wondered whether or not marriage was for survival, more for survival in previous days than these days. It looks like that is more accurate. So that's good to know. Good to know. I had suspected this for a while, but, it seems that technology can enable survival and being alone, being by yourself a lot more than to the point where you don't even need marriage. Of course, that raises up it raises up questions and concerns that are alarming. One of them being is, what about kids? What about families? What happens then? Honestly, a nation starts growing then, and issue starts popping up after who knows how many years. All right. So, I'll read some of this stuff off here, but I won't read the whole thing off. Okay, so the introduction. For some cultures today, marriage is a thing of past generations. Parents and grandparents may have married, but people today don't bother with marriage. Current customs and tax breaks don't require it, so why bother? For other cultures, marriage is almost a necessity of life, particularly for women, as I pretty much covered. Survival itself virtually hinges on being married. In any case, many questions are being asked about marriage in the modern world, so consider a few questions about marriage and insights into the truth offered by Christian scriptures. First, what is marriage? Now, the second question is, why should I marry? And the last is, whom shall I marry? And I guess there's a last question of, what if I marry? Question mark. Yeah. All right. First, what is marriage? If a person is considering marriage, he needs to have some idea of what he's getting into. So what is a marriage? Some people would regard marriage as a contract of personal convenience. If it suits the taste or advances the aspirations of two people, then let them marry. But if this view of marriage is taken, the outcome will be either disappointment or disaster. As soon as the marriage becomes a hindrance to either partner, then enough reason exists to terminate the sacred bond. In some cultures, if a wife cooks a bad meal, the husband can say, I divorce you, and it's all over. In other cultures, like today, if a woman meets a more attractive, more attentive man, she can all too easily end her marriage relationship. And this is something that I've heard time and time again on YouTube videos. Mostly because that's where I spend a lot of my time watching other people with what they put out, whether it's old news or relationships, thoughts, advice, how to do better while being single, because here it is. As a single adult, there's very little that actually helps us grow, mature, and keep ourselves safe. Actually, the Bible does do a pretty good job on being safe, regardless if you are in a marriage, a relationship, or by yourself. That's something I can appreciate. Because wisdom is something that is for everyone. And it should be for everyone, just because of all that exists. Alright. But, okay, moving on. But people are always hurt deeply when a relationship breaks up, even if it is a marriage of convenience. Also, if the relationship just kind of goes dead. I know someone in my old unit who she married the wrong people for status and wealth, and she was very unhappy. No idea where she's at or whatever's going on these days, but yeah, I got a couple stories tied with her. All right. Let me see here. Another thing is when people end up passing away, whether it's spouses or someone you knew, the grief is very real. And I want to say that relationships that are lasting, relationships that have importance, when a relationship ends, it's going to be felt by everyone who's involved in some way, shape, or form. Okay. Something about the union of two human beings creates interconnections of bodies, souls, and societies that are not easily dissolved. Children born in a marriage naturally identify with a father and a mother, and no one else can take their places. Also, I want to go on record and say that no one should take their places. Not the government, not anyone else. But if there is nothing there, then they need someone, a guardian, if not a parent. Alright. There is another question, another answer to the question, what is a marriage? A marriage is a mysterious, God-ordained binding of two people so that they should never be pulled apart, so as long as they both shall live. Something about a physical union, the social commitments, the bonding of two spirits defies an easy separation. It is a wonder, a mystery, a beauty that only the Creator God could have designed, and no one should pull apart what God has joined. Matthew 19:6. Alright. Yeah. Why should I marry? If you can never get out of a marriage relationship, who wants to run the risk of entering it? Wouldn't it be much safer to remain unmarried, uncommitted, free from the breakable bonding of marriage? Why not just enjoy relationships that you assume will come to their natural end someday, but keep yourself aloof from any long-term intentions? Then perhaps the separation will not hurt so much when it eventually comes. The reasoning of non-faith will follow exactly that line. Even Jesus' disciples expressed serious reservations about marriage. Matthew 19:10. If you have no faith in the good news about the ability of Jesus Christ to redeem, reconcile, and reform self-centered sinners like yourself and your potential partner, then you might well conclude that you should never marry. The risk is too great. The alternative, personal freedom, is too attractive. Yeah, but there's also a need there too, where finances, responsibilities, and costs need to be taken into account. So like trying to force any of this when it's not directly in front of you, when it's not an emergency, it's not going to end well. Some people just, it's hard to say, but the one thing I can stand on is the whole like, don't force it. Marriages never should be forced at all. Maybe there are exceptions to the rule, like in case of emergencies. I could see something there where a little bit of force needs to be used to push things along for safety reasons, probably, or maybe financial reasons. I don't know. I can only guess, though. Guess and go off of some stories that other people put out. But don't be fooled into thinking that anything can substitute for the lifetime commitments of marriage. Don't give yourself over to the intimacies of a sexual relationship apart from the commitments necessary to a proper bonding of body and soul. And part of that is actually pretty simple. The more you bring into your life, connections-wise, where like you emotionally connect, you build neural pathways in your brain and all that, like the more connections that are made, the harder it is to just simply unbind, to pull apart, to untangle, whatever the word is that you want to use. Like, these connections should be built up and stay just kept in your life, not just simply thrown aside. I'm under the belief that there's a lot tied in there, not just simply like, well, when kids are in the pictures, you have to build up around them and keep them safe. Let me see. This ties into another question that I asked him as far as like, is marriage for the adults or for the kids? Like, the kids that come along? Like, is a family for the adults or for the kids? It's an interesting question that just ties into this a little bit. I would imagine a relationship is needed for everyone, and the relationship itself can expand to include kids, where kids need parents. Yeah. All right. Sexual relationships too. There's a lot of bonding. There's a lot of like tying around, and there's a lot of experimentation too, from what I've heard. At least in the first couple of years, anyway. I would imagine the whole sexual side does taper off into something more stable later down the road, if there's a actual marriage or relationship, not that 50 Shades of Grey crap. Not saying anything bad about it, but that movie had a huge lack of safety and a lack of care, aftercare, with the two individuals involved. And those two ended up getting married in like the third movie, I think. I still need to see the second and third one, but I did watch the first one, and I was like, yeah, I kind of get why women fantasize over this. Having a lot of money so you can buy a lot of toys and do whatever the hell you want inside of a marriage or a relationship is actually appealing to a lot of people. And it's not like there's restrictions on what you can or cannot do, with the exception of what the other person says no. A marriage, even though it may be set by like the standards, the definition, and God puts things into place for two individuals, there's a lot of freedom within the marriage itself for those two individuals. And it's basically anything off the table is the stuff where you just say no to. All right. Let's see. But the union of two people is sacred in the eyes of God and requires permanency of commitment, which is something that seems to be lacking in today's world too as well, where there's just a lack of commitment, there's a lack of care, there's a lack of putting other people first, and especially communication. The communication doesn't seem to be there for a lot of people and a lot of relationships. All right, despite the scorn of a postmodern era, the sovereign creator God still regards people who explore the intimacies of sexual relationships apart from the commitments of marriage as living in fornication. For this violation of God's law, individuals and societies must repent. Honestly, I think there's a lot that's showing that in today's world now with single parents. From what I'm hearing, they're mainly women. Welfare with too many who are relying on the government to take the place of what a father should be, and there being a hardness of the heart, so to speak, where there's no forgiveness, there's no repenting, no turning, no changing, where like to get rid of the anger and the issues and to try to find solutions to this. Relying on the government for the rest of your life versus relying on another partner and going through the hard steps of working through forgiving and all of this is very hard, but it's something I've noticed that there seems to be a lack of. If other people's stories and words on their own experiences are true and to be trusted. All right, moving on. Whom should I marry? The initial answer to this question, one second. Of course, singleness. If the creator of the assignment for marriage, you can run the risk of marriage. Exceptions of singleness to this basic principle. The first man was originally made without a wife. Yep. Humans can go quite a bit without being married. Yep. We are capable of living deeply fulfilled lives as single individuals. Of course, for someone like myself, I'm in 100% unison with the whole, like, I am not meant to be single. I'm meant to be in a relationship. I believe that ever since I was a kid. For me, there was never any question about me being single, ever. But obviously I am single and I'm 37, so trust issues, depression, working through a lot of this stuff is just like, where do I go from here? What happens now? But then again, I look at all the other people outside. I'm like, look at what I'm missing here. Missing financial difficulties that comes with having more people in a relationship than myself. So I'm missing out on financial burdens. I'm missing out on emotional trauma, baggage, and possibly being used emotionally. I'm avoiding having the wrong person in my life because I'm not exactly the best judge of character when it comes down to, like, I like women. They're very beautiful, very very awesome in a lot of ways, but I'm just bad when it comes down to some things, and I would believe I'd probably end up being married to the wrong woman myself. I wouldn't exactly classify myself as someone who puts a woman on a pedestal, aka a simp, but back probably even 10 years ago, I probably would have been one, because I never put my own health, I never put my an importance on my own health and mental well-being and all of that. There is that in today's world. So yeah, like, protecting me from being used or being committed to the wrong woman is something that I have noticed. So being single can protect you from either the wrong people or from the responsibilities and issues that are tied to that come along with a marriage. Like, if you're gonna have fun inside of a marriage and all of that, everything that comes with being with someone that you love or like, you got to be able to handle the responsibility that comes along with it all. All right, let me see here. But God has made man and woman so that in most cases they will marry. No better explanation for this universal phenomenon of marriage that can be offered. For the well-being of all people, as well as for realizing the full purpose of the Creator, people should marry. The natural instinct of human beings draws them in that direction. So the next obvious question is, whom shall you marry? Whom shall I marry? The initial answer to this question is marry the person you want to marry. If the circumstances are agreeable, marry the person of your choice. Why should anyone get married to a person he does not want to marry? Obviously, many factors go into making a marriage possible. Cultural practice plays a vital role in marriage. Some families, tribes, and social groups will find it difficult or impossible to marry into certain other communities. Matters of education, wealth, age, health, vocation, temperament, and social contacts will all play a role in determining the person you will marry. But the basic principle still holds. Marry the person you want to marry, assuming the circumstances are agreeable. It does talk about difficult situations and finding yourself married to someone you did not want to marry. And that's hard. That's hard. In difficult situations, a person may find himself married to someone he did not want to marry. In some cultures, marriages are prearranged so that a person's own desires may not be adequately consulted. In other situations, various pressures may induce two people to marry. When these circumstances cannot be avoided, the persons involved must place their total trust in God, believing that He can make a way in the most difficult situations. And that's speculated as to why God has allowed things to enter up inside of marriage first off. What is differently and more unique than those who are single is because this testing, this refining helps bring to light either what's going wrong and problems and issues that should be fixed, or blessings from what we've done and for what's going on that is right. And there's definitely some protection there too, but you should always ask and bring protection with you wherever you go, whether by yourself or in marriage. This proves to be particularly true, especially when kids are in the picture. Whew. Hard to say, hard to visualize. I have never been in that position, so some of the stuff is just hard to visualize, for sure. It should be remembered that by the Lord's appointments, all sorts of people can legitimately marry and receive His blessing. At the same time, by the orderings of a sovereign and gracious God, some people who desire very much to marry may never find the person they regard as a suitable partner. One principle must always govern the marriage of a believer in Jesus Christ. He or she must only marry another believer. A believer in Christ must not be yoked together with an unbeliever. As circumstances make it possible, marry whoever you will, but if you are a new Christian in Jesus Christ, be sure you marry only another Christian. Sometimes a person who is a believer in Christ finds himself married to an unbeliever. You may find yourself in that situation because you were converted to Christ after marriage, or perhaps because your spouse fooled you so that they only appeared to be Christian at the time of your marriage. Now, what should you do? It is saying that you should hold fast to the appointments God has made for you. Remember that your unbelieving spouse could be converted through your godly lifestyle. 1 Peter 3:1. the part where it says sometimes a person who's a believer in Jesus Christ finds himself married to an unbeliever is found in 1 Corinthians 7:14. All right, back to the whole thing about 1 Peter 3:1. It has happened before and it will happen again, but if it does not happen, you can still glorify God gently by living faithfully before Him in your God-appointed relationship. Many factors should go into the choice of marriage partner. Seek the advice and counsel of godly friends who you know best. Consider carefully how your merger in marriage will make both of you able to serve God more effectively. Make a realistic evaluation of your career and financial circumstances. Certainly the mysterious factor of love should not be overlooked. Love is not really a feeling because there's hard work behind it. It's incredibly difficult in certain areas. All right, the last one about what if I should marry. Oh, okay. Let me back up here. Many factors should go into a choice of a marriage partner. Seek the advice and counsel of godly friends who know you best. Make a realistic evaluation of your career and financial circumstances. Certainly, the mysterious factor of love should not be overlooked. But remember, love sometimes begins before marriage, while at other times it begins after marriage. In any case, the cultivation of love will increase its fervor throughout life. Now, the final question may be asked, what if I marry? What if I take that gigantic step of commitment? Yeah. First, as you may recognize that the community at large has a legitimate interest in your union. Indeed, virtually all societies recognize that there's such a thing as common law marriage. And it goes on and talks more about that, yeah. Nothing in God's law forbids the solemnization of the commitments of marriage before representatives of the government. But in most cases, the best place for a Christian to marry is before family and friends in the presence of Christ Church. Oh yeah, there's definitely a lot of stuff on this. Not much else to add to that, but it's a good little thought on marriage. And there's a lot of joy that comes from it, but there's also a lot of work that turns it into something from what it is into something that is worthwhile and enriching in your own life, so that it doesn't just simply sit there, but it lives there in your life, and you and Jesus and your wife can just shine throughout all of the relationship. I should say spouse and not wife, because realistically other women are going to be watching this too. That's it. Whom shall I marry? Not bad. All right. Until next time.